Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest James Sweigert, and he's here today to share with us his new book, If You Say So, My Story and How I Changed It to Save My Life. Now, James is a new author, dynamic motivational speaker, and award-winning executive producer and director for film and television. To cope with the chaos and abuse from childhood trauma, he turned to drugs and alcohol, which led to severe depression and suicide attempts. This self-destructive pattern continued until he changed his story and his life. So let's welcome to the show, James Sweigert.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I understand it just came out a few weeks ago and it's getting such great reviews. I mean, as an author, you have to be so happy.
Yes, it's been a long time coming, and it was a challenge writing this book. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to share a lot of amazing things I've learned from my teachers, a lot of great experience and wisdom and hope. With others, and hopes that I might be able to help them the same way that my mentors helped me.
Well, I think your story, why it's resonating so well with so many people, is because it's so relatable. There are so many people that have gone through or suffered some type of child abuse that have, later turned to drugs and alcohol. And then at some point you get to this point where it's like, I need to turn my life around.
I hope people get to that point. I think some people miss that point, and absolutely. And I think that at the beginning of the book, I wrote a page in there specifically for the seekers. I said this book is for the seekers, and it's for those people who have gone down the road of life and have kind of run up against something, and they don't know what, and they're stuck. And they might be rich, but they're not happy. They might be successful, but they're not happy. And so I think that this is for people who are kind of running up against something, and they're like, "How did I get here? And why am I not where I thought I was going to be?" And it's really for people that are looking. And as I talk about, it's for people that just are stuck in old stories. And like you said, oftentimes there's childhood trauma, and even if it's subtle. Where, hey, maybe you weren't picked up for school, or your dad never came to your baseball games. That kind of stuff leaves an imprint on a child, and those messages that we get, and we create stories based on those events, and we loop them in our heads well into adulthood. That I'm unlovable, I'm broken, I'm defective. They're going to figure me out. I'm a phony. And so what I'm doing is what my great teachers did for me is they caught me and they just said, "Look, those stories are BS. You're making adult decisions based on misinformation." And so once I realized that I was telling myself these stories that just weren't true, I was able to create this vacuum where I could actually create a new story of happiness, joy, fulfillment, inviting love into my heart and into my life. And that's really what I'm hoping to do for others, is just kind of share my experience and show them that hey, maybe you're stuck in a story, and maybe you can change the story.
I think that's a thing that a lot of people can't even get to the point where they can recognize is like, what is that story that I'm stuck in?
For sure. And again, some of us aren't ready to take a look at that. But one of the most important lessons that I got was when I was calling a friend of mine and I was complaining about something one more time. Right? We have those friends that are just stuck in that loop, whether it's they can't find love, or they can't find the right job, or and they're always kind of learning the same lesson over and over again, or I should say not learning it. And this friend of mine, he said, "Sit down." He said, "Get out a pen and paper." And here I am on the phone with him, and I've got this blank pad in front of me. And he says, "Write each word I say down. Do," I wrote down do, "not believe everything you think." And he put the phone down. He hung up the phone. And here I am staring at this page that says, "Do not believe everything you think." And I had to really question my beliefs. I had to really question the things that I was holding as truths, because he was just trying to snap me out of this old story. and just what I was believing just wasn't true. And I think and that's what my book is meant to do, is I share some very painful, raw memories and stories and childhood trauma, to help crack people open. I think especially men, because when I talk about the molest and the incest and the sexual abuse that I went through as a child, and I love the Me Too movement. Women have been empowered to start to tell their stories, and we're starting to kind of sniff out some of these horrible men who've mistreated women, professionally and personally. But for men, the sexual stuff is really tricky because there's so much shame around it, and men just don't talk about it. And that was what, I'm friends with Sugar Ray Leonard, the great boxer, and he wrote a book called The Big Fight. And in his book, he talked about how he had experienced being molested a couple of times. And when I saw him say it in his book, I realized, wow, I need to tell my truth as well, because if the champ can lay it out there like that, he inspired me to tell my truth so that other men might say, wow, me too. And hey, they may not be ready to talk about it, but maybe they could reach out to me. Maybe there's a way that I can help them through it, or someone can get on the phone and say, hey, I identify with what you shared there. That was super helpful because I haven't told a soul. And, I will tell you that mentoring young men for many, many years, especially men who struggle with addiction, oftentimes they're acting out in their addiction because of these shameful memories and stories about their childhood, mainly, sexual abuse, that they just won't tell another man about. And so, I buried 5 guys this year already. And one of them just jumped off of the, Second Street parking garage in Santa Monica because we had talked about struggling with his father was very, very cruel to him. He had sexual abuse, but he just had a really hard time talking about it. And so, I can't help people when they're smoking crack. And that's what he was. He went on a binge and took his own life. This shame is a life or death situation for some people. And so that's why I want to talk about it, but I don't want to focus on your story, right? It's not about staying in the story. It's about addressing it, feeling the unfelt feelings, getting love and support around that process. Because it is, like you said, that you pointed out very wisely at the beginning of this, it's not that easy to just change your story. Right. And in my book, as how I talk about the different cars of the train, we got to go into the baggage car sometimes and we got to unload some baggage. And whether that's going to therapy and talking it through with someone you trust in a safe environment, where you're going to get the love and support you need to process those unfelt feelings. But then toss the baggage and get back up in the front of that train and start shoveling coal after, chasing your dreams and finding that fire in the furnace that is your soul's desire, that thing that, the universe and God intended us to be. I point to a lot of great athletes. It's a kind of an easy analogy or metaphor. When you point to Tom Brady, who's an incredible quarterback, greatest quarterback of all time, and when he's throwing passes, to Julian Edelman, and they're just on fire, Tom Brady's not questioning his career choice. He's doing what the universe intended him to do and to be. I mean, there's no question. And the same thing, you could use any sport for this. Leo Messi, when he's kicking goals and scoring for Barcelona or Argentina, he's not questioning his choice for his path. He's right where the universe intended him to be. And I personally believe, Marianne, that everyone has that in them. You may not be rich, you may not be famous, but there is that purpose. There is that fulfillment that is achievable and attainable for everyone. And it might mean being the most amazing second grade teacher in Charlotte, you know what I mean? North Carolina. It might be that being that kind of second grade teacher where students come back 10, 15 years later and say, wow, you saw who I was. You nurtured my creativity. I'll never forget the time you took with me, and they come back because there were a few teachers in my past who I remember that were like that. They just went the extra mile and they really tried to see who I was, right? Because that's all anyone ever wants is just, I want to be heard. I want to be respected. Right. And so my hope is that I don't know how to solve the world's homeless problems. I don't know how to solve a lot of the issues going on in the world. But hey, if I can reach out and find that person that's being blocked by their own story, and if I can crack them open and give them permission to create a new story, they might become community activists that can affect serious change in our world for the better, right? So, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this. I could talk about it on and on.
Well, I'm glad.
Hours, so.
Yeah, I'm very glad about that, because that's what we need. And especially, I mean, you're so right. I mean, there are all these resources for women that, find themselves in abusive situations, and there's limited, I think, to none for men. And you're right, there's this whole stigma. It's like it's something you're not supposed to talk about, but it happens. And I think, having these kind of conversations, brings it more into the light, where people are like, you know what, hey, this happened to me. I need to find somebody to talk to so I can turn my situation around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've helped over the last 30 years, I've helped countless men. In fact, on my website, there's actually a testimonial of one of the young men that I helped, telling the story about he actually witnessed me saving the life of another kid that was struggling with chemical dependency. And he had actually called me from a McDonald's, and his friend, Nick, had actually gone into the bathroom. And right before he had gone into the bathroom, Mitch, who was my mentee who was there, he saw Nick basically get drugs from someone, and he went into the bathroom to do heroin, and he didn't come out for 20 minutes. And Mitch called me, and I showed up about 10 minutes later, and I just went into fix-it mode and called 911 to get them on the line with the manager of the restaurant, who finally was convinced that someone was in trouble in the bathroom. We found the keys. We finally got in there, and he was sprawled out on the bathroom, with a needle in his arm and needles all over the floor, and it was horrible. He had OD'd, and I just immediately went into gave the phone to Mitch. Stay on the line with 911. I started giving him CPR for about 7 minutes until the EMTs got there, and they were able to give him the Narcan that slowly brought him back as he was on his way to the ambulance. And so I'm doing a lot of intensive work with young men to try to help save them from the brink of addiction and depression. And I'm happy to tell you today that at the beginning of this conversation, I told you I've buried a few men this year, but Nick is actually now thriving. And in my book, I refer to it as shoveling coal. He's actually a student now, and he's actually on his way to a conference where he and his team are presenting to a biological conference a potential cure for cancer. So,
oh my gosh.
You just never know. You never know you never know the change that you can affect in this world. And he literally just called me last night to check in to tell me he was going to this conference. And I'm like, wow, So, I mean, anything is possible in this world if we go for it, and if we believe in it, and if we create that new story, that anything is attainable. I'm 55 and I'm vibrant, young, and healthy, and I live a great life. And my fiance and I, we help tons of people, and we're very active and fit. And there's a lot of people in the 40 to 50 range that start to feel like they're on the back end of good times, and I'm aging out of my profession or industry. And there's a lot of stories that get created that are, again, just BS. And so what I encourage people to do who are any age is to say to themselves, my best days are ahead of me. Because the mind is a powerful thing. When you even look at placebo effect of how people are given drugs, and people, they do a placebo study where 100 people are given drugs and 50 of those people are given a sugar pill. But a huge portion of the people taking the sugar pill still feel the positive effects of the medicine, even though they didn't take it. That's pretty incredible. It illustrates the power of the mind, of just what I believe in. And it's really fun. This book has created a movement, the title especially, because I have friends calling me after reading the book, and they're like, oh my God, like I said to myself 5 times this week, if you say so, because they're catching themselves in old stories that just aren't true and are based on old ideas. And then one of my friends, who's a producer out here in Hollywood, he runs a bunch of TV shows for Fox. He said, I've said that 10 times to my staff this week when they didn't think they could get something done. And he would just throw it back at them. If you say so, and all of a sudden people have to reevaluate what they're actually believing. And when you start to take on this ability to detach yourself from your stories, and you're able to say to yourself, wow, if you say so, then all of a sudden you start to see stories that other people are carrying, that don't serve them. In fact, they're blocking us from actually pursuing our passions and from finding happiness, and true joy. I've been very successful. I've been very blessed with an amazing career. And, I live in Beverly Hills, and it's in a beautiful home. And, it's funny because there's a lot of people out there that will teach people how to get rich. And that's not what I'm about. John Wooden, the great UCLA basketball coach, he had a philosophy, and his philosophy was true success comes from the peace of mind that comes from the self-satisfaction of knowing that you did your very best. And that's the last of the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? Is always do your best. And to me, that, along with being impeccable with your word, which is the first of the 4 agreements, which is really what my book is about, right? Is so key, because I've got to watch what comes out of my mouth, because my feet follow that. Right? We know those people in our lives who we see them, who they're constantly like, their cell phone screen's broken. They're always late to work, and they're like, we're never going to make it. And they never make it because they're just stuck in a story, And so if we can catch ourselves and really just watch what's coming out of our mouths, like no more of that self-deprecating humor and that cynicism, that doesn't serve me today. And trust me, I was guilty of that, thinking that this feigned humility and these kind of jabs at myself with masked in humor. Our body hears that. The universe hears that, right? And I truly believe in the law of attraction, and that the universe will give us whatever story we tell it. So it might as well be positive, right? It might as well be a happily ever after story. It might as well be that my best days are ahead of me, right? If I say so. Because it has to start with what's coming out of my mouth. I mean, there's work to do behind it, as we've just talked about, but it's got to start with how I'm speaking about myself. It's really about self-love and self-compassion, right? Because when we're on an airplane and you have kids with you, the first thing they tell you, if the oxygen mask drops, put it on you first, then your child, right? And it's kind of that thing where it's like, hey, if we can't love ourselves, we're going to have a hard time loving anybody else or receiving love from anyone else. And so it's really about, self-care and how I perceive myself, and once I'm happy and I'm fulfilled and I'm cracked open to receive love and to give love, then I can be successful. Then I can achieve wealth. Right. But I mean, some of the most miserable people I've ever worked with, live here in Beverly Hills. And so money's not the key to success, but what I will tell you is happiness is the key to success. True success.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, I know in where you're at too. I mean, it's interesting. There could be people who are extremely wealthy, and yet all the money in the world couldn't buy them an ounce of happiness. All the things couldn't buy them an ounce of happiness. And it's really that inside job that needs to be done. And when we look at how you're talking about, it's looking at these stories and really pulling them apart and saying, is that real? Or is this, a real story? Is this something that's made up or something that was taught to me? You really start getting down to the point where you could start being happy with who you are without all these stories behind it.
Exactly. And, look at your arm. It's got hair on it. Well, maybe, I don't know yours. You're probably well groomed and probably not a hairy lady, but I look at my arms. I look at my arms, and you look at your arm and it's got hair on it. Like, we are animals. Let's not forget that. I mean, we're spiritual, but we're also animals. So we're imperfect, right? We're spiritually perfect in this imperfect world, in these imperfect bodies. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail. And so how are we going to frame that story? Right? Are we going to let ourselves off the hook and trust ourselves and others to be human? Because people will let us down. Right? And so then what are we going to do with that? Right? And forgiveness is a huge part of this, right? Because, in my book, I talk about there were some things I couldn't forgive for 35, 40 years. And I hung on to that. And I thought that forgiveness meant letting that other person off the hook. But it doesn't. Forgiveness is about letting ourselves off the hook. Again, another act of self-compassion and self-love. Because, I don't know. I believe in karma. I've tested it too much. Every time I cut somebody off on the freeway, somebody cuts me off right away. So it's I know that, and again, one of the other 4 agreements in Don Miguel Ruiz's book is incredible about don't take anything personally. Whatever other people are doing perceivably at you is actually, that's just their trip, and they're gonna do that to whoever's in the room, And so when I can detach from that kind of, judging and labeling everything that happens, right? Then I'm freeing myself for like, wait a minute, I'm not the victim of circumstance today. I can choose my own weather. And just like Abraham Lincoln said, people are as happy as they make up their minds to be. It's a choice. And that's what the book title implies, right? If you say so, the universe will give you whatever story you tell it. I want to let people know that don't know that they have a choice, that they have a choice, and it is a choice. And I didn't know it was a choice for a long time. I would just let the universe blow me around like a leaf in the wind and just end up in the mud puddles or wherever I was ending up, and all of a sudden when I was empowered by these amazing men and my wise teachers that were like, no, it's not how it works. We can set foot in the direction of truth and joy and love. And that's even how I work professionally. I take really good care of my people. I love everyone I work with and I love what I do, and it shows. And, when you treat your staff like that, they'll take a bullet for you. Like they'll go to the ends. My team works really, really hard, and I'm really, really proud of them. And, we produce top TV commercials for Apple and, all the networks and all the studios and all the brands and Google and, all the big tech brands. And it's like, my team works really, really hard. And it's funny, I write about this in the book, but one of the greatest management techniques I learned from my late dog trainer, Jonathan Klein. And when I was training my dog with him, he said, never correct your dog unless it's absolutely necessary. He said, what you want to focus on positive reinforcement. And not that my staff are dogs and I don't treat them that way. Well, I don't know. I treat my dog pretty good. So, but my staff, I don't admonish anyone, especially in public. If that's something that you're feeling like, especially professionally, that you're constantly having to discipline someone or admonish them, maybe they're not right for your team. And I also say this when I'm talking to corporations that, morale is not a line item on the P&L, but it definitely affects the bottom line. And you just can't have rotten apples in the barrel. I'm a big fan of Sir Richard Branson, and Richard Branson is just takes such good care of his people. And as a result, they work so hard for him and for the company and for each other, so, again, that's just constantly acknowledging even the lowest person on the totem pole. I want to know about them. I want to know what they're doing, what they're up to. Our receptionist just went on a honeymoon, and I was stoked for her and super happy that they had a great time. And she came back, refreshed and ready to get to work. So, I think that's really important. And it's really hard to take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself, right? It always starts at home first. You got to put the oxygen mask on you first, and then you can put it on everyone else.
That's so true. And it's interesting because when we start in this place where we're able to love ourselves, that's kind of where the magic starts to happen. Things start to change around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I was able to I started writing this book about 5 years ago. I was actually writing 2 books. I was trying to write about my family, but as you read in the book, it was very painful. It was very challenging. Then I was also writing this book about my train metaphor. And the title of that book was Shoveling Coal, which is really about doing the work we need to do to achieve our dreams and to achieve happiness. And, I was struggling. And then all of a sudden it just kind of became really clear that, wait a minute, if I can mash these 2 things up, then that really gives me this great vehicle, literally and metaphorically, to convey all these great kind of nuggets of wisdom. And and I was able to look back and see how these events that happened in my childhood created these stories that I felt broken. And I would say that to people. I would say that to my friends. It's like, after my divorce, I was like, I feel broken, and it's like, I understand the feelings of grieving the loss of a dream and grieving the loss of a marriage. But these stories were stories that I had long before I had ever even met my first wife, and long before that divorce, and were well after. And I was just really reacting off of misinformation about these stories. And it really came down to, I went and did the Hoffman process up in Napa. Bob Hoffman created this incredible program, 7-day off the grid process. And, there were huge executives, CEOs from tech companies there, and plumbers and carpenters and people just there to try to, like, who kind of got to the middle of their lives, and they're like, why am I so miserable? What's going on? On paper, my life should be amazing, but I just feel miserable. And so this process really helps. And my fiance, Elizabeth, had done it 6 years prior, and she had told me about it, and my mentor had done it. He had suggested it. And so I'm like, I got to go do this. And so that was where I really was able to get cracked open and process those unfelt feelings of the sexual abuse that I had gone through, and really just kind of get flat with the universe, which is what I call it. That's what I do when I'm doing workshops with people and when I'm coaching people. It's like, we got to get flat with the universe, which means just have no karmic debt. Forgive the people you need to forgive, ask for forgiveness from those that you need forgiveness from, and just get flat so that you can move forward. Right? Because even some therapists are terrible because they just keep people looped in there every week. Let's go talk about the problem. And it's, if you're looped in that story, it's really hard to break out of it. And so, I believe in processing, those events, looking at the story, changing the story, and then really focusing on what's good and what's working, and living in gratitude for what you do have now. Because if you're not happy with what you got, you're never going to be happy with what you're going after. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work that way. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's here right now, and it's written about in all the great religious books, even that heaven is here on earth. And that's, I think, what they were referring to is that, wait a minute, we do have a choice, and it is spiritual. It's a very spiritual path, getting in touch with that spirit, that inner spirit. I opened the book with that story about the football game where I came in with my school spirit, was yelling for the team, and became this kind of cheerleader for this team who I didn't even know, and was able to affect positive change in that. And so if people struggle with the concept of God or concept of spirituality, it's like, I always start with the school spirit. Everybody can go to a University of Texas. Sorry to offend Oklahoma people, but any big school, Notre Dame, if you're in that stadium, that school spirit is palpable, right? And that's what we're talking about. It's that energy within us, that enthusiasm for life and for victory and for triumph. And that's how we tap into that and become a cheerleader for ourselves, and that's, I'm not a big fan of the life coach title. And so somebody said to me once, they're like, so you're like a life coach? I'm like, no, I'm more like a life cheerleader, because you already have the playbook inside you, in your heart and in your soul. I'm just here to help you crack that playbook open so you can win the game.
I love that. I think it's so empowering because you're really telling them that you're there cheering them along, instead of telling them, hey, I might know more than you, or have this figured out a little bit better than you, So it gives people the opportunity to really stay empowered throughout the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to touch on this before we get going. I mean, my goodness, time flies when you're having fun, and you're such a great person to talk with. And I'm so inspired by not only your book, but the work that you do. I'd love for you to share with us the program, the 141 program.
Yes. Thank you for asking. I've had an amazing career and amazing life. And, some people are out there trying to learn how to be a life coach or a public speaker or an author because they want to make money or want to build another career out of it. I've had an incredible career and I've been really blessed. And so I think that the best messages are those that are inclusive. And so as opposed to having private conferences and expensive workshops or an expensive speaking engagement, I want my message to be available to everyone. And so I created this 1-for-1 program. So when Coca-Cola hires me to come out to Atlanta to speak to their corporate team, I will also do a non-paid pro bono speaking engagement with a charity of their choice, or an underfunded school in Atlanta, or a program that can really benefit from the message as well. So I do a lot of free talks because I'm happy to do that. I just did a pro bono talk for future doctors for the neuro camp at Keck School of Medicine here at USC in Los Angeles, and just speaking to seniors from high school that are going into the medical programs in colleges, and kind of speaking to future doctors about chemical dependency and my struggle with drugs and alcohol, and kind of ultimately how I came through that. And so I'm a big fan of being able to keep this message alive for everyone. And so that's what the 1-for-1 program is about, is to really keep the message inclusive and make it available to everyone.
Well, I'm so glad that you do that. My goodness, what a service you provide. James, where can our listeners connect with you, learn more about your book, and be part of your community?
Thank you for asking that. My website is jamessweigert.com. That's SWEIGERT. And the book's available on Amazon. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, as well as Twitter. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Those are the best places to keep up on any events where I might be speaking in your area. And you can also request if you have an organization or a company and you'd like me to come speak, you can also access my information on the website, jamessweigert.com. And thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate the support.
Well, thank you, James. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, If You Say So, My Story, and How I Changed It to Save My Life. Again, if you'd like to connect with James, you can at jamessweigert.com for more information. I'm also delighted to announce that the Kindle version of his book is available at Amazon today at a special rate. It's for 99 cents. So pick up the book, read it, and change your life. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.